Okay, so thank you all so much for coming out today. I'm super excited. Before we get started, I want to ask everybody a question. And so people on Zoom, if you would just want to go ahead and type it out, and people in the room, you can also like type it out, or you can yell your answers, and I can, oh no, wait, because the whole room is microphoned. But here's my question. 2 questions. Are your students reading, and how do you know? First question, are your students reading, and how do you know?
Yes, because I can see them on their phones.
Okay, you can see them on their phones. We have another yes from Taylor. How do you know?
Actually, that was Taylor can hear us.
Oh, never mind, Taylor. Thank you. I'm glad you can hear us.
And Zoom folks can also unmute and speak to us.
Also unmute and speak too, totally.
All right, Jeff said they have in-class discussions. Sarah Burkhart says they're reading not enough, they read together. And Ellen says students are reading a bit, but I think mostly skimming very quickly before class.
Yeah, I know, I think this is pretty typical for what I'm experiencing. Students are often sort of going through it quickly, maybe a surface level look through. My next question, I guess, is how do you assess that learning or what they're reading? How do you assess that what they're reading, they're doing effectively? Just sort of curious, what are the different methods that you use? So we have discussions, that's one for sure. What else?
Written response.
Written responses, how so?
Like the beginning of class asking, oh, here's a broad question related to what we read. Give me 5 minutes of writing about that question. Let's see what people are coming up with.
Good.
I've done journal prompts based off of text.
Yeah. So like sort of coming in the beginning of class and sitting it down, doing reading journals either in class or before class. Anything else?
Yeah, we have Jeff said they incorporate information into their work, and Ellen said I asked them to respond to particular sections of the reading so that I know they are at least engaging with that portion, and I have them do small group worksheets to demonstrate understanding of those sections.
Excellent, beautiful. And these I think are the fairly traditional ways of doing it. And so one of the things I want to do today is show us another way of doing it, especially on online environments. Because a lot of these things that we're talking about sort of are more geared toward or sort of easier to facilitate in face-to-face environments. And so one thing I've been interested in as I've been teaching more hybrid, more online courses is how do I monitor my students' reading or watch what my students are reading? How do I understand that they understand what they're reading? And how do I make sure that what I'm asking them to read is not too much of a burden? Like, how long are they actually spending on it? Are they doing it? And so one of the things I've started using is Perusall. And so I want to talk a little bit more about that today. I'm going to do that by starting to share my screen. So you don't have to pay attention yet, but what is Perusall? I'll open it up so you can at least look at that. Move this. Perusall is this page. And it is a collaborative reading and annotating platform that integrates into D2L, which I'll show you here in a second, that allows students to comment on text, videos, other student essays, and web pages. It was created by a professor at the University of Texas in Austin, and it's basically been used in higher education and K through 12 in order to better see how students are reading, how they're writing, or not how they're writing, how they are reading in a more collaborative environment. So I've been using this on and off since basically like the pandemic happened, when we had to sort of shift very quickly to online. And I wanted to get a better sense, specifically in my literature courses, how my students were reading, how often they were reading, how deeply they were reading, and whether they were making connections between that reading and other things we were doing in class. And so it sort of started there. I kind of thought about it just a little bit, but it sort of fell off the wayside until me and a couple of my colleagues in the English department have started thinking a little bit more seriously about how we monitor and assess our reading. So I've been trying to become a bit more methodical, and this is sort of our goal for today, is to introduce to you how to use this tool in a couple different ways. So objective number 1 for today, you can write it down, you don't have to, I could put it on the board, but I forgot, is to explore Perusall as a potential platform to measure students' reading and to assess better measurements or to assess better strategies for assessing that reading. And so what I want to do is talk about 2 different kinds of reading. What am I assessing? Reading comprehension and engagement, and reading stamina. So these are going to be what I'm primarily focusing on today, is how does this tool allow us to monitor both comprehension and stamina? Because sometimes when our students are reading, and I think we sort of highlighted this, they often skim or don't read super deeply, or maybe they'll read for like 10 minutes and then be like, I need a break. And so it's like, how do we actually get them prepared to be reading at a college level? Especially when, I don't know if you all saw that article about how college students can't read an entire book anymore. So again, how do we actually get them to this level? So, Perusall integrates with D2L. As you can see here, this is my D2L page for my class this semester. And right here, I have Perusall built into it. I don't really remember how I did this because I did it 5 years ago and I've just been copying it into my class ever since. So if you're curious, ask Tammy Ray because she will know, but also Perusall will explain it. So when you come here, this is sort of how it's going to look. And I'm going to show this to you in 2 different forms. The first form I'm going to show it to you in is the faculty view, which is this. And then I can show you just really quickly what students would see on their end, just so you can get a better sense. But when you integrate it into your system, the first thing it will do is it will take you to this page. And it will not start at ready to go. It will start at the welcome, and it's so nice. And you can start with an empty course. You can copy an existing course. So once you have your course made, you can literally hit copy the course from semester to semester, and you never have to do anything ever again. It will even copy your comments that you wrote, not the students though. So you'll come here, and the way it sort of works is you can start with starter assignments that they've designed. I've never done this. You can also select content. And so I think this is really interesting and really exciting, especially if you're interested in, what's the word I'm looking for? Open
Educational resources.
Open educational resources, thank you. Because they have a whole range of things that you could potentially use, like this textbook, the writer's workshop or the writing workshop, that you could then assign to all of your students. So if you are in a class with a textbook, you could potentially have your textbook uploaded here. Or if you're like me, you can integrate stuff into the library, which I'll show you here in a second. You can have students pay for this. Upwards of $15 is what they suggest. You can also have 0. Hopefully one day we can buy a college license so we don't have to force our students to pay anything. But this is just a really great way of trying to keep it relatively cheap for students or setting like a very specific price that you don't want them to pay more than. All of this is really good. None of this is super, super crucial, but it's just helpful to get started. Where I think that this is going to start being more helpful is right here when you get to library. So in the library page, you can start putting in any PDF or anything that you are interested in. So you can already see here that I have articles from my class that my students read. So we have one by Fang called Writing a Literature Review. We have another one by him writing a book review. But these are basically all of the things I will assign my students over the course of the semester. I have all of these already made, so I just sort of, again, every semester just copy and paste them over from one to the next. But this is basically my library. Students have access to this all semester. They can look in here if they want. They don't, but they could. It's not just PDFs though. And over here, if you look on this little like scroll down menu, you can see all sorts of things. So again, you can find a book from their catalog. So again, if you're using a textbook or you have a book that they already own, you can plug it in and they can look through an entire book, which I love. The document that you have created, a PDF, an ebook file, Word document, PowerPoint presentations, literally any kind of document that you have created. You can also have them look at web pages. So if you don't necessarily have a PDF of something, but you want them to look at like the EPA website, which may or may not exist as of this moment, you can just have them click on this. And then they will be able to actually annotate that website. You can also have them do quizzes. You can have them look at YouTube videos and comment on YouTube videos. You can have them do podcasts. You can have them do all sorts of things that you are interested in having them look at. The source material does not, or the source genre, the type of document, doesn't super matter because all of them are potentially available for you. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to build your library, put in all of the articles that you are interested in, and then what you're going to do is start creating assignments. And so all you have to do is come up here and hit add assignment, and remind me at the end of this, or here in a second if anybody's curious, to talk about one of their new assignments that they just created. But traditionally what I do is the standard assignment. A lot of these are new, but the standard assignment is just assigning a reading to your class and having them read it in a traditional sort of way. Differentiated assignment is if you want different groups to be reading different things. So like group A is going to be reading this article, group B is going to be reading this article, and group C is going to be reading this article. You can sort of put in different ones. The newest one, peer review, which if we have time, I would love to talk about this. Students submit their own essays, and then other students will be randomly assigned, and they will comment on them anonymously. So you're actually doing peer review as opposed to just editing. And I've never done any of the other ones, so I don't know what those are. Ask me about it, but I won't know. So you'll just come up here and you create a standard assignment. And you just type in your assignment name. So like if I were doing this, I would be like literature review, because that's the next essay that the next assignment that they have to do. You just put the due date whenever you want it to be due. I'm gonna make this up because that's not the actual due date. And then you're gonna go through here. So the content, what do you want them to assign? And so I would want them to read the Fang literature review. And so I'm going to assign that, and then you get to choose. Do you want them to read the whole thing? All content? Or do you want to assign page ranges? You're like, I don't really need them to read it. I only need them to read really pages 1 through 5. I want them to have all 20 pages in case they want to read it, but they don't need to. And so you can sort of indicate this to give them a clear sense of what you want them to do and how you want them to do it. You can also create multiple parts. So if you want them to read 2 different things, I want them to read both that literature review and a secondary piece, maybe to think about how this article does a literature review. You can assign multiple pieces. I don't know that this is the best way for students, and we can talk about that here in a second. Students, this framework sometimes confuses them, and you have to sort of teach them that there are 2 parts, but I'll show you that with an example here in a second. And then you're just gonna set up your options. These are your instructions for your students. And so these will be things like the comments, you write out the directions, what are the actual instructions for students, what should they be focusing on, what do you want them to be reading, basically. You can set the visibility, so again, you can create all of this beforehand and you can say this is the date that students actually get to look at it. You can assign it to specific students, the entire class, specific groups. You can exclude certain students. They just give you a lot of options on how you actually want to do this. Then again, some more choices. You can let students respond anonymously. You can let them post. They can decide whether they post anonymously. You can force them to post anonymously. You cannot allow them to post anonymously. Students love posting anonymously. I think it just sort of takes some of the pressure off. But you can do this in different circumstances. So like when I do peer review, they have to do it anonymously. Anytime they review another person's writing, they have to do it anonymously. If they have to do another assignment, they always have to do that in person. Again, all of these are sort of things that you can choose as it makes sense to you. And then the scoring. Perusall has its own scoring system that's really cool and really interesting. I don't fully understand how it works exactly, but you can just go through here and you can decide how you want your stuff to be evaluated. So this will auto grade it for you. I don't really use it, but you can sort of see my system where it's like 90% of my grade is going to come from what you actually wrote. I don't know how I fully fixed it. The other thing was like, the other 10% was, did you make it to the end? You get 10% to make it to the end, and then these won't fix for me and I can't fix them. So like you ultimately can get like 150%, but students can also get points for how long are you actively reading it? Like if like 90% of this time is active reading, you get more points. If you get response from your comments, you can get extra points. If students are upvoting your comments, you can get extra points. And I don't do quizzes, so I don't know how those work. But you can basically set the system and it will auto grade all of your stuff for you. I generally find the auto grader is fairly accurate in ways that maybe I am not. But before I keep going, does all of this make sense? Anything you need to see again before I start going into actually looking at what students are doing with their reading? How it works, how you might operate it, anything at all.
Callan, are you setting the range for all those things in terms of like, oh, the time spent reading this? Is that something you're kind of mainly putting in like, oh, this should be a 30-minute read article. This should be a 45-minute piece.
So it's partly mine, and then I'll show you. It's partly mine and partly just seeing what students do semester to semester.
Okay.
So initially I'll be like, yeah, I think this should probably take about 2 hours, and then I'll actually see what are students doing.
Okay.
It's somewhat close, but it does give you a much clearer perspective of how long students take on it.
Is Perusall prompting you with like a blank to insert to that, or are they giving you anything from it? Like, so if I upload like a 10-page article,
yeah,
does Perusall say, hey, for reading, do you want the basic time to be 2 hours for this? Or
it doesn't. It won't set a timer.
Okay.
It can take students as long as it takes or as little as it takes, and I will show you that here in a second. But it does not set like specific times.
Okay.
Like it's not going to say students have to read all of this in like an hour and a half.
Okay, leave that to you.
I don't think you can set that though.
Okay.
But yeah, no. Other questions, comments?
Yes, Ellen's confused about the
I'll let you do
page.
it. Yeah.
Yep. Oh, I mean, you're welcome to. I just figured it'd be easier.
Yeah, will be easier.
Okay, so I'm gathering that Perusall isn't free, but is it like pay what you can? And you have to ask students to pay some amount to complete their assignments.
I've never paid for it. I've been using it for 5 years and I haven't paid for it. I'm sort of waiting for that. just stop. But no, all you have to do is you have to just click a button that says, I don't want to have my students pay for it. I promise to tell my colleagues about it and try to get an institutional license.
Huh.
Which is what you're doing right now. You're holding up your end of the bargain.
I am. I'm
Perfect.
doing what they asked me to do. I also really like it and I think it's good, but I have never, in the 5 years that I've used it, I've never had a student pay for it. My husband uses it at the University of Illinois, and I think he does make students pay for it, but it's only like $10. No, he doesn't because they got an institutional license this year. So he doesn't have to make them pay for it anymore. That's right, he made them pay for it last year, but not anymore. Other questions?
That's all.
Okay, cool. So now what I want to do is I want to start thinking about how, now that I've built all of this, what do I actually start looking for? And so one of the first things that I want to think about is reading comprehension. And so how am I actually assessing students' reading comprehension? And most of this is happening through comments. So in an online environment, I traditionally do a discussion board. And I don't know about all of you, but I often find that my discussion boards aren't very good. They're fine, but students often post something very quick. They don't really engage with each other. And they're not super engaged with the text all of the time. It's sort of, I don't want to say perfunctory, but often kind of perfunctory. And so what I'm doing here is, I will open it, is I'm trying to make that a little bit more guided. And so when you open this, you'll see a lot of comments, but students can basically, as they're working on this, I want to make it just slightly bigger. Nope, wrong direction. There it is. So when students are reading this, all they have to do is basically highlight stuff here, type in comments, and hit enter, and this will auto-populate it into like the entire class. And so what I'm able to do is see how my students are actually responding to this. So here are all of the comments for this like 15-page article, and all of the different threads that students have started. So here are all of the parts where students thought they found something important in the text and wanted to respond to it. And so rather than it just being sort of disconnected in a discussion board, you can see the ways in which these are explicitly tied to particular parts of the text. So rather than just working on it, students are actually learning how to annotate the text and engage with it on a much more sort of like, I don't want to say micro level, but like, we'll say personal, even though that's maybe not the correct wording. So what I'm looking for in this one is basically, are students engaging with the text and do they understand what they're reading? And so I can let students just comment on whatever they want, but in order to do this, one thing I like to do is ask my own questions. And so here, we'll go here. So one of my questions to make sure I can understand that they understand what they're reading is, I just have a basic, here's a paragraph that I think is really important. Can you summarize it in your own words? And students basically just have to read it and put it in their own words. And one of the things that can help, because that can be really stressful, particularly if you're not necessarily a super strong reader and you're reading these really dense, difficult college level texts, is you get to see all of your classmates' comments as well. And so not only are you reading what this says, but you can read how other people are interpreting it, and you can use their insights to better help and sharpen what you understand or how you understand it. You can also turn this off so students can't see other people's comments until they make one of their own. So if you're concerned and you're like, I don't want them to just be copying it, you can set this up so they have to post it, and as soon as they post it, the rest will become populated and they can start comparing their answers to others. But one of the reasons I like this, and I'll show it to you, is this comment. I got 43 responses in it. And most of the comments, because I told them to, are about 3 to 5 sentences long, but 43 comments, 43 students responded. I have 49 students in the entire class. Yes, I have now 49 students in the entire class. So I'm hitting almost 100% response rate with this one. But again, it's giving me a clear sense. Most of my students, as I'm reading through this comment, seem like they get the gist. And then if you're someone like IS right here and they say something really smart, like I like how they compare it to writing a detailed product review and just adding your opinion. I'm like, well, that's a really smart, unique way of thinking about it that no one else has had. I can sort of upvote this to signal to my students like, hey, I, Kellen Bolt, really liked this. Or another student could like this too if they were like, yeah, I also agree. But this just gives me a clear sense as I read through this, like, do you actually understand the important parts that I think you need to understand? How are you framing it? But like, are you actually doing what I'm looking for? Make sense? Okay, so beyond just summarizing this, like, are they able to articulate and summarize this accurately? One of the things I'm really interested in too, I just wanna make sure. No, I wanna show you one other thing before I go on. Okay, the other thing I wanna show you too is, it doesn't just have to be me, like I can guide them, but one thing I think is really exciting is when you start doing stuff like this. Is when students are doing it on their own. So you have this student ID over here, where they're basically articulating and summarizing that a book review should include strengths and weaknesses. They're summarizing it, appraises the relevance, value, significance, contribution of the book by discussing its merits and limitations. That sounds super smart. What does it mean? I don't know. But I could use this comment in order to get a clearer sense of it, or to see that my student actually understands it. And you can see I'm not the only one who found this helpful. So again, I can see better how this student is actually doing it, and that student can then clarify that for more students. So it makes, hopefully, the reading comprehension of this student evident, and the students who maybe aren't comprehending it, it gives them an extra sort of tool to get to that point. Okay, the other thing it can help us do is, and not to be mean to this person, but I'm gonna be mean to this person, is it can also give us slightly weaker ones, where it's like, hey, this is important information for a book review. A book review requires an opinion backed up with examples, blah, blah, blah. Yes, you're on the right track here, but you can even see how that's maybe not as developed as some of the other ones. And so this might be a student where it's like, hey, this is a place where I can intervene and be like, you're on the right track, but let's get a little bit more specific about what we mean with some of these things. When you're talking about an opinion, what exactly do you mean by that? Because it's less of an opinion, the word I'm looking for more is like argument here. But like, we just want to get them specific so they understand it. And you can start to see the ways that other students are maybe like trying to help them out. Like here, it's not just a summary, it's your take on the book, backed up. So again, it's showing understanding, but it's maybe not as deep as we've seen in other places. And so maybe this is just a part of the reading that we need to go more over in class. But that identifies a place of potential weakness for me. The other thing that I'm really interested in with this is not just their comprehension for the article itself, but can they apply what they read in this article to other stuff? Are they able to actually transfer what they read into other environments? It's cool that you can read, but do you understand that what you're reading here is related to your assignment and is also related to other things that we're reading in class? And so one of the things that we like to, or I'm trying to measure here is sort of transferability. And so, oh, okay, that's right. So one thing I'm doing here is in this very first question, we'll go up here. I have this part. They're saying a book can be a single author book or an edited volume. One thing my students often struggle with is understanding what the difference between a sole authored book is and an edited volume. And they'll often treat an edited volume as if the person who edited that volume is an author of the entire book. And so in order to try to get my students to recognize that these are different things, I ask this question. Which one of these is your book? Because they had to select their own book. And who wrote or edited your book and who wrote the chapter? Are they the same or are they different? And then basically what students are doing here is showing me, one, that they can cite a book. So are they citing the book properly? Is it italicized? Are they giving me the author? And can they actually identify the difference between an edited volume and a sole authored book? And so again, part of this is just seeing like, are you able to take what you're reading here and are you actually able to apply it to the thing that is going to be worth 100 points in about 2 weeks? There are other ways that I can do this too, and I don't always have to point it out. Students are also able to do it as well. That's not what I want. How do we make this connection in the book review? Perfect. Students can even ask particular questions. So we have the student HI right here who's a little confused about it. And what they're able to do is ask a question and they can just ask other people. So this is what we want them to do. It makes a connection between the book and the broader scholarly literature, the literature base of which the book is a part. This student is like, okay, that sounds great. How do I do those things? And so they just ask. I'm a little confused on what we have to do. Do we have to write about the author's credentials? Do we write about who might be interested in the book? What do we mean here? And so again, I could answer this, I could address this, but what they're showing is they recognize that what they're reading here is something they are going to be evaluated on. They're going to be tested on it, not necessarily the right word. And so what they can come here is DA just walks in and says, well, this is what I think that it means. It's the overall conversation, ding, 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 that's what I'm looking for. And then she gets really specific with an example about her topic. She's talking about fast fashion's effect on climate change. I think it might be vice versa, but The overall conversation for me is climate change. If the overall conversation is climate change and fast fashion's role in it, so in order to make that conversation, I might add how climate change is affecting all of us, or whether fast fashion is a part of that conversation. Excellent. And so she's able to show the student what this means and how it applies to something else. So like, good job, both of you. I love both of this. You're doing really good work. The other thing is, again, I'm just gonna show you a few of these, where students are taking more ownership. Like this person, ID again. Does a book review require the bibliographic citation at the start? A traditional thing that students often struggle with. Where do I actually put the citation? They're looking at a specific example and they're like, well, I see that the bibliographic information is here. Am I supposed to be doing that? And then no other student answered, so I did. And so if a student asks a question and no students are responding, this can also give you a chance to just intervene. So again, yes. And now other students, as they're reading this, can also, if they had that question and weren't brave enough to ask, they can now see that answer as well. And one other one, again, it's not anything good. I just want to show it to you because I'm excited. If they have questions on just what things mean, like what does underpin mean and how can we incorporate it within our book's message? Again, I'm just able to sort of define it. I just Googled it. And then I just explained how it was. This is one of my former students. So I was, again, able to connect it to things we had done in the past to sort of help them try to understand it better. But really the goal here, what I'm looking for is, are they able to take what they're reading here and are they able to transfer it to their actual assignment? Are they able to see that what they're reading is not just for reading, but actually has utility outside of that? Not only for the assignment, but also, and I have to go down, for another essay. And so I told you you could break things into two parts. The next part would be down here. Students don't see this. And you'll sort of see it here in a second. Because if you look at like my first comment where I ask them, again, my summary question. So here I'm asking them to show me that they understand it. What is this paragraph doing? How is it operating? All of that sort of jazz. 43 people responded to the first one. I lost about 10 students almost. Most of my students, and also that's after I emailed them and said, hey, you all forgot to do this. Please go through and do it. It's hard for them to catch the different parts just because it's not user-friendly. So I just want to sort of emphasize that at the front. If you do the different part assignments, make it very clear for students that you have to, or that they have to. But yeah, so what you can see here is in this article, this is a professional published book review on the book called Black Comics, The Politics of Representation. Let's move this, sorry.
You can just minimize that, Kellen, if you want.
I've like forgotten all about how like COVID teaching worked. It's like, no, yeah. And so what I'm having them do is I'm having them read this. And in the FANG article, it identified 5 moves that you need to be making in a book review. And so what I would do is ask them that sort of question. What is this paragraph doing? How does it connect to FANG's rhetorical moves? Do you think it's successful? Why or why not? And they have to break down what they're thinking. They have to identify the rhetorical move we're looking for. They have to be able to identify what it's trying to do. And then they have to identify, why is this successful or not successful? Because that's also what they're doing in their book review. And so this is just giving me a chance to see, like, are you actually understanding what you read? And can you put it into another context? And so this helped me identify that like there was one rhetorical move number 4, that students often sort of struggle identifying. And so again, that was a way to me to be like, hey, this is really important. You need to go back through and you need to do that. Yeah, no, cool. Any questions on the comprehension?
I have a quick question.
Go for it, Sarah.
All right, so my question is, how do you keep students from parroting? Reading someone who jumps in there and then you have kind of replications. How do you assess whether they actually get it or they're just kind of imitating?
No, great question. So you can't necessarily do that upfront.
Okay.
Part of it, especially in the beginning, you kind of just have to trust that students aren't doing that.
Okay.
But the one thing you can do is you can set it so they can't post their comment, and they can't read comments until they post one.
Okay, okay.
So you can sort of set it up so they can't. You can also create smaller groups.
Okay.
So if you only want them to be able to read like 5, so they can't read like 50 comments of what other
Right.
people are saying,
Right.
you can absolutely totally
Okay,
do that.
cool.
But yeah, no, I do think that that is sort of an issue, is like, how do I know that they're not? But again, sometimes just seeing that parroting stuff can be helpful because it helps them
Yeah.
understand
okay,
it better.
Sure.
Yeah, great question.
I have a question about the text and the highlighting. I noticed like your part is highlighted in like a rosy color and then they comment on that highlighted part. But then there's also this yellow and blue. So
Great question.
my question is, are the students each having their own document and those are their personal highlights? Or is it one document and it's everybody's
One
highlights?
document, and so that's maybe one thing I don't love, is it's one document that everybody is commenting on. The blue comments, let's see if I can remember. Blue comments are student comments. Let's see, or they might be mine. They'll tell you at the beginning. Blue comments are my comments, and yellow comments are student comments. And so when students are doing this, if they see a blue comment, they know that they have to respond to it because it's something I'm saying. If it's a yellow comment, it's another student's. The red just means it's the highlighted comment. The one thing I don't like about this is everyone sees it and it can be a little distracting to see all of these highlights. Yeah, not perfect. Yeah, that's the difference. And when you start this, it will create like a little like walkthrough where it explains what all of this stuff means for students. Like anytime you create a new account or log on and you're not logged on, it's like, let's go through the tour. I'll show it to you in a second when I show you the student view too.
There's a question in the chat. Does Perusall have an auto function that allows the tool to respond to the students, or does the instructor always need to?
I don't know that it does. As I've had to do it every single time. They have they're bringing in more AI features, but I haven't played with any of them. Like you can have it, like if you highlight it, I'll show you. Let's see if it works. Like you can highlight something and then just suggest a discussion prompt. I don't know if this will affect, maybe I shouldn't have clicked it. We'll find out in 2 seconds. But it can sort of just see what this is about and see how it's operating to see if there is a question here that you're interested in. And again, I don't know. I would read through this and see if it's actually good. What is the significance of using ACE as a lens to explore? I don't know. I don't think that sounds relevant. So I would maybe not do this. I don't know that the AI stuff is super great on this yet. Any other questions? Okay, then let's talk about the thing that sort of makes me the most excited right now, and that's talking about reading stamina. So if I go to this course home, one thing that I think is really, really cool is getting to see the overall score. So this breaks down is now I can see that about, now I'm gonna have to do maths. 74? Cool, 74, about 74% of my students are completing this to some degree of success. Again, 66 are doing maximum score, about 8% getting close to it. I'm pretty happy with that. And what it's showing me is about 26% of my students are falling below the level I want. But it's giving me a clearer sense of what are they doing? How many comments am I getting? Are those getting better? Are they getting worse? How many questions are there? How many do I still have to answer? And then the thing that we were talking about a little bit earlier, about how long does this take? And so what it's gonna start doing is it's gonna start giving you the average reading time, the average active reading time of the different students. And so as you do this more and more, you'll get a clearer sense of about how long this will take students. Again, every student's different, 100%, some read faster, some read slower, but this gives you a pretty close estimate. And what I've generally found is, I mean, obviously, because it's the average, it's not too far off the average. But yeah, so what we can start doing is the overall, great. And so what we can do is start comparing. So book review, 66% complete, the first one. Discourse analysis, we drop. And so something is clearly happening, maybe because it's not the first week of school, we're getting a little less excited, but our comments are going up. So what's going on? I'll show you in a second. But we're also sort of getting better here. More of our students are falling into the successful range, even if they're not all hitting complete max score. Awesome. Well, let's go into discourse analysis. And hey, it's again about an hour and a half. Discourse analysis, again, about an hour and a half. We're hitting 114 comments. We're back up to that 68. So again, we can sort of see where that one article dipped. And I can sort of talk about why it dipped here in a second, because I asked my students about what happened. And you can start to see that they're going back up. Again, the work not submitted, pretty much consistent. And so what I'm identifying here is I basically have a subset of students who just aren't doing it at all. And so that's just a way of just emailing them, like, hey, what's up, what's going on? And some of the students responded today just being like, I've just been forgetting, sorry, I'll go back and I'll do them. But what this sort of shows me is something was going on here that was sort of demotivating my students to post like quite as deeply or thoughtfully as they had. And part of that when I talked to them was just the article was too hard and too difficult. And so this was just like, oh, I suddenly see why your comments maybe aren't as in depth, aren't as like rigorous, aren't as lengthy as they were before. And that's just because the article maybe wasn't as helpful, wasn't as good. But this just gives you sort of an overall sense, and it gives you a better sense of like, how are students participating? Yeah,
Do you share this data with your classes?
No. Not unless they talk to me about it. I might at the end of the semester. I've been thinking about doing it more, and I'll explain why. Because some of these things are really interesting and really helpful for students. So you can also get into more specific analytics to get into more detailed measurements of how they are reading or not reading. One of my favorites is, okay, ready, everybody? When was this? No, let's do this one. When was this one due?
January 24th.
January 24th. When do you think most of the students commented on it?
January 30th.
Oh, yeah. January 23rd, starting at 2 p.m. That's when most of the comments started. But you can see the flood of comments comes in about the last 4 hours before it's due. This is pretty consistent, but it's giving me a very clear sense of when are my students posting? They are waiting until the absolute last possible moment. For reading stamina, that's maybe not the best choice. You don't necessarily want to start running a marathon right before the end because you're probably not gonna. This is maybe the thing I would be most excited with sharing my students with this is the page use. This is how often a page is being clicked on and how long students are spending on that page. And so this can become really interesting and really helpful when you are trying to read, because do you notice anything about students' reading attention? It's all geared toward the beginning. Or it comes back just a little bit toward the end. And so this is a way to show my students, like, your goal of trying to hide your best ideas for the middle is actually a terrible strategy, because most people lose their attention middle of the essay. And you're like, well, maybe that's just this essay. This is fairly
So
consistent.
this is like 20 pages of text, and then the orange line is how long they spent on each page?
Yeah, so 15. So page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, so each individual.
Tech is on page 8.
Nobody knows.
Great question. No, people do know, because I then went and looked, and I was like, what's going on page 8? The answer is nothing.
They're just tired.
Someone left their computer.
Yeah.
open. And so you have to be attentive to some of these things, because you'll see it here in a second. Just somebody left their computer open and that's it. But you can sort of see yeah, no, there is a question here, and that was a big question, and so you can see that spark. That one makes sense. This one is just an accident. I know who it was because I asked them. But yeah, you can sort of see, again, how often are they clicking on it? They're clicking on this one the most because it just opens first. But you can sort of see, yeah, this is how long they're spending on it. And I think this could just be a really helpful strategy to show your students how the ordinary person reads. This is not unique. This is pretty traditional for the average person. Yes, Sarah.
And so what do you then do with that as an instructor? Like, for example, we talked about decrease in attention span. We know that there may be better results if students didn't procrastinate, for example. If they took some time, how do you then, this is the data, but how does that affect your teaching, or what do you do with it?
Great question. So this is the semester where I'm sort of trying to get a base of all of this. And one of my students asked me about this today as I was explaining this to them, because I do show some of them when they walk by and I'm like, you want to see something cool? I don't know yet.
Okay.
And that's sort of what I'm going to spend the summer trying to do is how do you actually intervene and try to improve student stamina? Because part of it would be you need to start earlier. You need to give yourself more time. One of the other things I'm probably also going to start doing is asking more questions at the end.
Okay.
And so deliberately drawing their attention to these spots where they're maybe not hitting it otherwise. And that's probably something I would start doing over the course of the next couple semesters as I revise this. But yeah, as of right now, I'm not totally sure. So if you have any good ideas, I would love to hear them.
There's a question.
Please, yeah, ask. I love this. This is fun.
Does the tool assess the difficulty level of a text, or is
Yeah.
that the instructor?
That's it. I have to do that. Yeah, they don't do lexical counters and stuff like that.
I mean, I have a suggestion, and it would be related to how they improve sprinters distance, so that if you want to be an 800-meter 2 times around the track sprinter and run at full pace, you start with a 50 going full pace. You build, you build, you build, you build, you build. So have you ever thought about doing a short text, a little tiny bit longer, a little tiny bit longer, a little tiny bit longer, so that they're developing the skill kind of in a sneaky, slow way?
So that's what I do in my 101 class, is they start with a sort of popular memoir, and then over the course of the semester, they get harder and harder. So by the end of the semester, I assign them an article from an academic book, and they have to read a 30-page article. And so in theory, the goal is to try to get them up to that stage. I don't so much do that in 102, which is what this is reflecting, because in theory, I thought they'd already done that. But I do think that would sort of be my ultimate goal. And I do that with the discourse analysis, but they have to read 2 things in it, and the second one is really, really hard. But the first one's 5 pages. But no, I think that would probably be the direction I would go, is slowly teaching them with longer and more difficult text as the semester goes on.
One other thing, Helen, do
Yeah.
your students have a habit of looking words up that they don't know?
No.
I know how I say, yeah, it's no, but I'm almost kind of, you'd think that, the breadth of vocabulary also, the more you kind of practice, even if it's small, what you don't know, it kind of slowly expands your ability to think. I don't know, maybe that's just too
Oh my
difficult
gosh, that
to
could
do.
be totally gamified. Which one of these words is not real?
Yeah.
No, I like that. Yeah, that would be, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was one of the, I think that's just, that's a slower moving thing, but I'm wondering how you get, because it was to your sprinting point, there's also the need for an increase in comprehension. Like, do I know what these words mean?
And there could be ways where you actually actively do that, where I highlight words that I think
For
they won't
example,
know.
like,
And I'm like, what's
yeah.
this word mean? Yeah, when we get to the word, I can't think of one off the top of my head now. Globalization, yeah, what does this word actually mean? Can they define it? That would be,
Right,
yeah,
yeah,
no, for
okay.
sure. I think that's super smart. I should do that. The other thing you can do here, and I'm just gonna show this, is you can have it grade your assignment too, and I'm just gonna like pick a student, because it has this weird formula and I don't totally understand it, but you can see their fun maths. And again, they'll straight up betray a student reading or watching to the end. This student only read 30% of the content before the final deadline.
Ooh, dang.
Oh, get ready, hold on.
That big.
That's like, I'll put you on
I want
blast.
to see the students,
Oh my gosh, do
well,
you
I'll
share
say-
that data?
The other thing I can do here, and this is gonna get, I'm not gonna do this. I'm gonna do it with one of my older classes, because these are all current students and I don't wanna like betray any of their information. So I'm gonna give you a group of students where I know that they are all graduated and I don't think that they would care about sharing this. But you can also, as you're looking individual students, what you could do, not what I wanna do yet, is on the analytics, I can also do a student activity report. And I can see how long did they view it in total? So again, 6 minutes, and you didn't really look at it. 3 minutes, nar. 4 hours and 48 minutes, well, maybe that sounds like a long time. Sounds like you might have just left it open for a long time, indicated. Hour and a half, 20 minutes, okay, well that, or hour and 12 minutes, that's maybe a bit closer. And so you can see how long did they have it open versus what is their actual active reading time? How much time did they actively spend reading this? And so you can sort of see here, Teresita, 92% of her time was active reading. She is deeply engaged in this in a way that, like, no offense to some of the other people, maybe not quite so much. Maybe they had something going on, they were working on it, they had to stop, that's a-okay. But this can be a way that, like, as we're monitoring stamina over the course of the semester, part of our goal is not just to have them read longer and more difficult text, it's also to get this closer to 100%. Do I think it's ever gonna hit 100%? No, because reading's hard, it's distracting. But this just gives you a clear sense of how long are students actually engaging with it? And then how many comments are they doing too? But you can look at that with other stuff. You can also see, like, basically, like, what's their average word count? Like, so, like, again, Angelina's spending 2.5 hours on it. Well, why is she doing that? She's writing these massive comments. The average word length on hers is 844 words. Like, and that makes sense based on her, but like she is going like, and not the average, the total. But like, so she is writing like substantially more than, like, almost twice as much as this person. And so again, we're getting a clear sense of, like, how are students actually engaging with this? How much time are they actively doing it versus not actively doing it?
There's a question in the chat. Can you go back? You had shown like a single student's report. Can you go back and just kind of review that in a little bit more?
Beautiful. I would love to. You can also look at individual students. So let's pick on May. And so May has 101 comments over the course of the entire class. They spend about 13 hours actively reading course material. It probably takes slightly longer than that, but that's okay. Then you can go into analytics and I can break this down for the actual individual students grade. If this isn't what they were asking for, have them tell me. Because it's basically sort of the exact same thing, but it's just sort of a student view of it. Was that what they were looking at? Is that what they wanted?
Yes.
Is that what you wanted?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So yeah, no, it's just looking at the entire student so you can get a clear sense of this. So like one thing I did today is I was meeting with a student for their first one. For their first one, I don't want to show it to you. Where basically their first assignment, their active reading time was 10 minutes. Their second one was like 6 minutes. And it's one of the things where I was able to talk to them and be like, oh, well, at first it was like, how are you reading? And they're like, oh, I just sit down and I read the entire thing. And I was like, do you really? And then I was able to point this out and they're like, well, no, I don't always read everything. I've kind of just been skimming it. And so you're able to sort of be like, hey, you guys, like, I can kind of see this. How can I help you? How can I support you? And one thing we haven't talked about, and I want to, just so I can give you more time to ask questions, is how do I know my students aren't using AI? Well, you don't. But they might be able to give you kind of help. You see over here where it says audit? If you click on this, this is any comment that it finds to be a little confusing. So it can be all potential issues, comments where the instructor have flagged as inappropriate. I've never had anyone flag anything as inappropriate yet, but maybe it'll happen. But comment was pasted in. And so you can click this and it will start to show you, like, here are the comments, here's everything that was copied and pasted. And so you can go through here, like, for example, I'll show you this was the student today that I was talking about where their average reading time for this article was 16 minutes. Here's one of their comments, right here. Here's one of their comments, here's one of their comments, here's one of their comments, here's one of their comments. No, this is their last comment. So it's all of these. And so basically that student was just like, I was like, you read and wrote all of this in 10 minutes? And they're like,
Where are they copying and pasting it from?
ChatGPT.
So it can just tell that the by the keystrokes what is happening and it's all being imported. Okay.
Yeah, because they're just like, they're not actively typing this. Like, that's what it's monitoring. When it's doing stuff, it's actively like, are you like moving the thing around? Are you typing stuff? And so if you're not doing it, it's just like one thing, hit enter, it's gonna register it as a copy and paste. Now, are all of these AI? No, not always, because sometimes you have students where English is not their first language, and that was the other student I was talking with today. This person, CM. English is not their first language. And so one thing that they're doing is they're putting this in like the translator, a grammar checker, so that way, as they said, they can use better words, it's grammatically correct. They're like, but no, I wrote all of this, it just doesn't sound good when I wrote it. And so this can be a time where you're like, hey, no, I just want to know what you think. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm not looking for it to be polished. But what I would say is don't go accusing all of your students of using ChatGPT, but it will give you other clues where it's like, if they're not reading it, but they're writing these massively long comments, well, that's suspicious. And so again, it just gives you different sorts of insights on how to, again, measure whether students are actually reading, whether or not they're actually understanding it, and how their stamina is changing over the course of the semester, and whether or not they actually wrote stuff. But this has been Perusall. It's been really effective. My students are mostly like it. Some of them don't because it can be a little difficult. One other struggle is because this is not necessarily fully in D2L, like I have to click on another link. I have about 6 students who just have never clicked on the link. And this is not including the 18% who don't comment. Those are the 18% who clicked on it once and then never again. I just have a group of students, and this happens every semester, where no matter what I do, I cannot get them to go onto the other platform. And I think that that's pretty typical for this, but that's one of my other big flaws that I've been seeing as I've been integrating this, is just getting everybody in this system is sometimes crunchy. Yeah, questions, comments, concerns.
In the chat. How is Perusall assessing active reading and active engagement versus kind of scrolling? Like, what is the there?
So I'm not entirely sure. There is a thing on here where they explain what active reading is that I just found yesterday. But it's basically how quickly this thing, why can I not think of it? The scroll, how quickly it's moving. If it's going something like this, it will sort of count that as active reading, but it's not gonna sort of count that in the same sort of way where it's it will count it as active reading, but it won't necessarily, it'll register in the final time tally. Because it'll be you didn't spend enough time on that. And that's sort of what you have to do, is kind of just look at the average reading time, because it'll kind of just betray it. And so I can give you this because this isn't going to give anybody scores out. I have to select a report. But again, you can sort of just see here, 16 minutes versus 10 minutes, even if this was active reading, it's probably pretty quickly scrolled through just because of how quickly they were going. Versus something like 58 minutes, even if they were scrolling through, I'm not necessarily going to be knowing, but again, even if they scroll through a little bit, it's probably okay because they're still hitting about 71%. And so again, if they're going too quickly, it won't count, or if they go too slowly, it won't count. It's sort of a happy medium. And too slowly is literally you're sitting there for 3 or 4 minutes. Oh, you're not reading anymore. Yeah, Kathy.
Have you ever thought about conferencing with your students who are like Diana up there, who looks like she's at 99%, and ask her can you just explain to me how you use this app, or how you use this application, and what it looks like for you, and kind of walk me through it? And
No, they should.
maybe glean some.
Because normally I've only been talking to students who have been struggling with it, but it would be fun to talk to the students who are doing really well.
Yeah.
Go explain. Help me.
How are you doing it?
Yeah, how are you doing it? What do you like about it? How do I get more people to where you are? No, yeah.
I actually have two questions. I
Yeah.
might have missed this from coming a little bit late. For the first question is, so typically, how many texts do you have them engage over the course of a term? Like, what does that look for a class?
For 102, it's 10. Oh, yeah, and one of those things too could be like for one of their assignments, they have to submit their own essay and then they get peer reviewed. So like this one, I don't even have to do anything, they had to submit stuff. And then they automatically get assigned random people to review their stuff. And if they didn't submit anything, they get doubled up over here and they don't get any.
Okay,
Yeah, so it's basically, they have to do about 10 over the course of the semester, and that's just so it equals 100 points.
okay, and then in, I know you said it can't be linked to D2L. Do you have to import their names, or are they, like, how does that work in terms of your class list?
So you can link it into D2L.
Okay,
And you can actually integrate it much better into this. And if you ever ask Allison Douglas figured out how you could do it where you click on like the content in a module guide and it just literally like puts Perusall into D2L. I don't know how that worked and I could never figure it out.
okay.
But it does work and you can make it more integrated. And I think if you're able to get it there, you're probably gonna get more engagement that way. But no, all students have to do is, for this class, literally all they have to do is click this first link and it creates an account for them with their name, with their email addresses. It just automatically does everything for you. You don't have to do anything. If you create an account through Perusall itself, like my husband always foolishly does, then you have to like give them the link, they have to sign up for it, and that's a much bigger sort of like lift. So this is great, makes it super easy.
Question with the analytics view, whenever you're looking at that, is it always by section? Or like if you're teaching 2 sections, English 102, is there any way to look across your sections together to sort of aggregate, hey, for this assignment, it looks the same across both my sections, or are you doing that manually?
So I would have to do that manually.
Okay.
So this course right now, I don't know if you can see it, is actually 3 courses smushed into one.
I was wondering based off the number of people you're saying.
Yeah, but versus like, this is the first semester I've ever done that because I just learned that I could do that. But like for this one, for example, I don't think these are the same semester, these 2 are. I would have different courses and then I would just sort of have to manually look at them across from each other.
Okay.
So by me putting all the courses together, I sort of ruin my ability to do that. But because these are all online, I'm not super interested in that because all of these students are getting it the same thing anyway.
And I'd almost argue you didn't ruin your ability. It's almost a better thing to see it, hey, across this, what are the trends taking place, rather than, hey, this is isolated to one individual section
Yeah.
here. Yeah.
No, but you can also like download all of this stuff. So like right over here, it says like download all the comments. It's not just all the comments, but it's sort of like all of the information that's in this. And so you can sort of print that out and you can sort of compare that too. They're just huge. Very, very big.
The other question I have is less on the assessment side, but more on sort of your modeling side. Like, do you use this also to annotate things that you're posting? Like, oh, an assignment sheet, hey, slides, like, let me show you what I think is really actually important in this document itself too.
I haven't, but I could.
Yeah.
You can literally put anything in here. Like also if I had like, because I have lecture videos, if I wanted to put lecture videos in here to make sure my students are actually watching them, they would have to do that and then they would have to like comment on the videos themselves. Like as they're watching it, like little comments would show up and they just boop, 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 boop. And so yeah, literally you can put like basically almost anything in here as far as I know. Yeah.
Does it have any accessibility features? Like it can read to you, or you can make it the font bigger, or you can change the, I don't know.
Though you can make the font, and they have an option, and I don't totally know exactly how it works. I should try to figure this out because I don't play around in the student view too much. They have a dyslexia feature where you can turn it on. So like this stuff right here would turn, it would change the font. So it's more like friendly for people with dyslexia. There is an accessibility issue that I don't understand because my husband would have to explain it to me because he got in trouble with his university and that's one of the reasons they didn't want to do it. I think they fixed it. Something with the color is wrong. The color is not super friendly for something with color blindness, but I don't know exactly where that is and none of my students have said it's an issue. I don't know that the accessibility features are like super abundant yet, but that said, the Perusall people are fairly like responsive to stuff. So if this is something you're using, you could probably like reach out to them and be like, hey, I've noticed that you could use this accessibility feature. And it's probably something that they would be interested in eventually incorporating if it's not already there. Because yeah, they're still building on this and it's honestly getting better and better. It's way better than it was 5 years ago.
There's nothing else in the chat.
Cool. I don't know if I have anything else to check, but we're also only 3 more minutes.
Yeah, Kellen, this is so interesting and helpful.
Yeah. It's cool. I don't know. I think it's really neat. Again, like the thing I also like too is, and I just want to show this one more time, is like the first time I did this and I got like 372 comments. When I do a discussion board, I'll get like 80. I'm just like, the amount of engagement I get with this is just so much better. And students, I don't know, they seem to take to it pretty organically after they do it a couple times. It takes a couple times, but once they get it, they sort of get into it. Especially in a literature course. Like in a literature course in particular, I think that this is super great and super fun. Particularly for students who maybe don't like talking out loud a whole lot. This is a great way of seeing what they actually know and you know, can demonstrate it to you in a way that like feels better for them. And also, if it's a writing course, they're doing a ton of writing. I wish I remembered how much, I should have done this. You can see how many total words, if you download it, students wrote. And like one time it was like 30,000 for one of the assignments, which is like a ton of stuff. Maybe it was the entire class was 30,000. I don't remember. I don't do numbers. But yeah, no, it's been really great. It's been super fun. If you ever want to use it and you want somebody to talk to, I'd be more than happy to like come to your office, walk you through it, do it over Zoom, anything you want. I think it's super great. And then we can pressure the college into trying to get us an institutional license, so none of us ever have to pay for it or feel guilty.
Okay, I've promised Helen that the recording will be sent to the appropriate parties.
It's not
Parties are
me.
aware
Yeah. Any other questions? Otherwise, it's been super fun. Happy to show you this. Yeah, any questions you have, feel free to email me at kbolt@elgin.edu. And I'm happy to talk about this as much as you want.
How much is a site license?
I have no idea. That is a great question. Hopefully not that expensive.
I'm curious if anyone's using this solely as their LMS. Like, cause it seems like a lot of things, built like for an institution, is there anybody who's moving to this? Are there things that an LMS does this can't do with it? Just even seeing what's available on the left-hand side, I'm like, what is lost?
That's
And
interesting.
I'm not making that argument for us institutionally, I'm saying on the record, but like, are there institutions that are doing that?
I don't think
Just to be
so.
clear.
I think with the, first of all, with the accessibility
Yeah,
issues.
There's room to grow there.
That's like definitely a no-go, but then also, it seems like there are different types of engagement,
Yes.
particularly with assessment, that you can get in an LMS that you're not getting here.
Yeah, like even D2L, like for all of its problems, has more like functionality in certain respects. When it comes to the reading stuff, I think that this is best. I don't know, because I was just in a presentation that they were doing. They never framed it as being a replacement for an LMS. Like every time they talk about it, they talk about integrating it into things like Canvas or Brightspace or D2L. Like I think they're very aware that like this is an add-on,
Okay.
not something that stands by itself. You could if you want, like if you want to create a book group with your friends, you can totally use this for that too. Because that's how they also advertise it.
Thank you, Kellen.
Yeah, no,
Thank you very much.
It's fun. Yeah, anytime.
Thank you, Zoom folks.
Yeah, thank you all for coming.